Have you ever had one of those moments where you and someone else lived through the exact same situation, but both of you walked away completely sure you were right? Same scene, same words, same facts, and somehow, two totally different stories. Why does that happen? Why do people look at the same moment and come to completely different conclusions? Here's the first thing to understand. Your brain is not always built to chase the truth. A lot of the time, it's much more interested in protecting what you already believe. You wake up in the morning and check your phone. A few posts, a few short videos, a few comments. Nothing dramatic, but something strange is already happening. The opinions that sound like yours feel easier to accept. They slide right in. The opinions that bother you, you shut the door almost instantly. Maybe you tell yourself it's because their tone was annoying. Maybe their example was weak. Maybe they sounded too extreme. And sure, sometimes that's true. But if you slow down for a second, there's a harder question hiding underneath it. Did you reject that idea because it was actually wrong? Or because you didn't want it to be right? That's a very different question. People are really good at seeing what they want to see. We believe what we want to believe more easily than we realize. When someone we dislike makes a mistake, it stands out. When someone we love makes the same mistake, we soften it. We say they were tired. They were stressed. They didn't mean it. There had to be a reason. It's strange. But honestly, it's also just deeply human. I do it too. If I meet someone and my first impression is good, I start building a whole story around them. A small kindness means more than it should. A late reply becomes, they must be busy. A cancelled plan becomes, something probably came up. Without realizing it, my mind starts collecting evidence for the conclusion it already chose. And the opposite happens too. If I don't like someone at first, the exact same behavior feels different. Quiet becomes cold, careful becomes suspicious, reserved becomes rude. It's the same action, but a completely different interpretation. And here's the unsettling part. This doesn't happen because people are dumb. In fact, smart people can be even better at it. Why? Because when you're intelligent, you're often better at building convincing reasons for what you already want to believe. You can defend your bias with style. You can make it sound logical. You can make it sound objective. So a person can be completely driven by emotion and still feel totally rational. That might be the scariest part. You can be protecting a feeling while sincerely believing you're following logic. Think about what happens when you start liking someone. You notice the good signals first. They listened to you carefully. They smiled at you. They kept eye contact. They remembered something small you said. Those moments get highlighted, but the uncomfortable signals? Those get edited down. Their texts are inconsistent. They keep canceling. When it matters most, they stay vague. And somehow, all of it gets explained away. Maybe they've had a hard week. Maybe they're just bad at expressing themselves. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But the truth is, the signs were there. You saw them. Your heart just had a preferred ending. So your mind started cutting the footage to match it. The same thing happens at work. If you've spent weeks or months building an idea, you naturally want it to succeed. So you start collecting evidence that supports it. Success stories look big. Warning signs look small. If someone raises concerns, you might label them as negative, cautious, or not bold enough. And because of that, you often don't notice failure when it first begins. Not because the problem was invisible, but because the problem was emotionally inconvenient. You kept shrinking it. News works this way too. So do short videos. So do online debates. So does basically everything on your feed. We consume huge amounts of information every day. But what stays with us is usually not the most accurate thing. It's the thing that fits our world best. That's why our beliefs can feel stronger over time. Not necessarily because they've become more correct, but because they've been reinforced more often. And repetition does something powerful to the human mind. When you hear something again and again, it starts to feel familiar. And when something feels familiar, it starts to feel true. That's one of the tricks your brain plays on you. Comfort can disguise itself as truth. So after a while, you're no longer believing something because the evidence is strong. You're believing it because it feels natural. Because you've heard it before. Because it matches your tribe. Because it settles your nerves. Let that sink in for a second. Now think about the last post or video that made you genuinely angry. Not mildly annoyed, actually angry. Was it because it was false? Maybe. But was it also possible that it threatened something you believe about yourself, about life, or about the kind of person you are? That's where things get really important. Because those are not the same problem. One is a question of fact. The other is a question of identity. A fact can be examined calmly. Identity is different. When your identity feels touched, your emotions react first. And once that happens, your mind often stops searching for truth and starts protecting you. That's why arguments can get so intense, so fast. People think they're defending an idea. A lot of the time, they're defending themselves. And honestly, I think there's something sad and tender about that. Because human beings are fragile in ways we don't always admit. To hear, "You might be wrong," sounds small. But emotionally, it can land like a threat. Because if I'm wrong about this, maybe I'm wrong about more than this. Maybe I misunderstood a person. Maybe I misread a relationship. Maybe the way I've been living isn't as solid as I thought. That's why we so often choose stability over truth, familiarity over accuracy, emotional safety over clear seeing. And the hardest part is that this choice feels completely natural. So natural, in fact, that we usually don't even realize we're doing it. Most people will agree in a general way that humans are biased. That part is easy. But if you suggest that their judgment, right now, in this moment, might be biased, too, that's much harder to hear. We can admit that our past self was naive. We can admit we used to miss things. But today, right now, we feel sharp. We feel awake. We feel sure. And that confidence is exactly where the trap can hide. Sometimes the moment you feel most certain is the moment you should slow down the most. So what do you do with all of this? You don't need to become perfectly objective. That's probably impossible. But you can build a few small habits that make you more honest with yourself. Start with one question. What am I trying to confirm right now? The truth? Or my belief? That question sounds simple, but it can change everything. Because the moment you ask it, you step back just enough to watch your own mind. You start to notice what's happening. Oh, I'm not really investigating this. I'm defending a conclusion I already picked. That tiny moment of awareness matters. Because awareness slows thinking down. And slower thinking gets swept away less easily. The second thing is this. Keep one thoughtful opposing voice somewhere close to you. Not rage bait. Not someone loud and careless just to trigger you. I mean someone calm. Someone fair. Someone who disagrees with you honestly. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You may even feel irritated. That's normal, but sometimes discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that your view is getting wider. Some ideas are uncomfortable because they're false. But some are uncomfortable because they expose what you've been avoiding. And those are worth paying attention to. Third, when your certainty feels unusually strong, delay the decision a little. People love fast conclusions when they're angry. Also when they're excited. Also when something feels incredibly satisfying. That emotional rush makes us want to decide now. But if you don't actually need to decide today, wait. Give it a day. Sleep on it. A day later, the emotional charge is often lower. And when the emotion drops, details you couldn't see before suddenly come into focus. Fourth, try treating the phrase "I could be wrong" not as a hit to your pride, but as a skill. Because being willing to be wrong doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care about seeing clearly. That mindset changes more than people expect. In dating, at work, in family conversations, in friendships, the less you need to be the one who's right. The easier it becomes to have a real conversation. Not a fight to win. A conversation where two people try to understand what's actually true. And maybe that's what maturity really looks like. Not always being right. Not having the strongest opinion in the room. But being able to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing for sure, while still wanting to see more clearly. The truth is, none of us are perfectly fair. We all see the world through our experience. We all build meaning through our wounds. We all understand other people only as far as our expectations let us. So the goal isn't to become someone with no bias. The goal is to become someone who remembers that bias is always possible. Someone who can say, maybe I'm leaning Maybe I'm editing. Maybe I'm protecting something. And because of that, you look a little slower. You listen a little wider. You react a little less quickly. Is there a moment coming to mind right now? A time when you gave someone you liked every benefit of the doubt? A time when you remembered only the mistakes of someone you couldn't stand? A time when you surrounded yourself with opinions that matched yours and mistook that for certainty? There's probably at least one. You don't need to feel ashamed of that. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. But that very human tendency should never be allowed to make your most important decisions for you. Because in the end, the thing we need to be careful of is not just false information. It's information that comforts us too quickly. The kind that feels so good, so clean, so satisfying, that it makes us stop asking questions. The kind that sounds like it's completely on our side. That kind of message can feel like relief. But relief is not the same thing as truth. So the next time an idea feels almost too satisfying, pause. The next time you want to label someone as good or bad right away, pause. The next time a conclusion arrives a little too easily, pause. And ask yourself this: am I getting closer to the truth? Or am I just making my favorite story feel stronger? Maybe real growth begins right there. In that uncomfortable little space where you admit you could be wrong, and choose to look again anyway. Because maybe maturity isn't about being the person who always knows. Maybe it's about being the person who can stay open long enough to see what's really there. And once that happens, we start misunderstanding the world a little less. Other people too, but most of all, ourselves. So if a moment came to mind while you were listening, don't just let it pass. Hold onto it for a second. There might be a clue in that memory. A clue about how your mind protects you. A clue about what you're afraid to question. A clue about what kind of story you keep telling yourself. And sometimes, one honest moment like that can change a person more than they expect. Because in the end, the real danger isn't always being lied to. Sometimes it's how easily we relax when the lie sounds like us.